Testing, 1, 2.
Welcome to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery starring Jerry Springer, along with Gene Galvin and me. I'm Megan Hills. We're recorded live in front of a brilliant studio audience at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky.
My daddy came home.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, just learning how to use a microphone for the first time, Jerry Springer.
This is like if you talk into this, then people that are not in this coffee parlor can hear you.
Okay, when you find those people, you let me know, sir.
Hello. What?
Hey,
yes.
Well, you know, and by the way, we have Brent James and the Vintage Youth coming up to play a little bit later on. We love them. They've been here before, and we are going to talk some sadness because this podcast is being recorded only several days after the horrific tragedy in Las Vegas. 59 people dead, 500 people wounded. It's just unbelievable. We'll come back to that. Couple things, though. Well, one, I guess you got the email. I got it. It came from Megan. Megan Hills I'm talking about. Let's hear from Megan. She's unbelievable. But the love we all have for Megan doesn't preclude her getting damned annoying at times, because I get this email, and you must have got one too, about she's demanding that I have a drug test, that I take a drug test.
Well, not just you.
Yeah.
Not just you. Jerry has to.
Oh, you're always careful about that.
It's never.
You're
never
aiming
isolated.
at me,
Wait.
but you.
It's the whole group.
It's
A
strategy.
drug test.
Yes.
Will I have a chance to study?
Oh my God, you can't. I can't even with you. This one, though, I have severe concerns about.
But
No,
I'm going to
I'm-
tell you something, Megan, and that's the point. I called corporate and I said, "Can she do this to me?" And corporate said, if you have to take a drug test, there's a chance that Jerry is then going to make some jokes about your body part, and they said body shaming. So therefore, they say that the only drug test I have to take, and I am willing to take it, is a written one.
We'll do a hair follicle test. How about that?
No. Nobody's touching my hair.
Never mind. Never mind.
I don't know how to put this delicately, but is Viagra a drug?
I'm going to formally put in my resignation.
No, the other day, I'm 73, so the other day I took one and I started choking on it.
Yes.
And I had a stiff neck for 4 hours.
Yeah. Now, good. Now, Jerry, I like that. That's
one was
new
pretty good.
material.
I'll give you that one, Jerry.
I like that. Good job.
That's it. He's done. Cut him off.
That's all the time we have for tonight, folks.
Great show here tonight.
No, that's new material. I mean, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't happen often here on
No offense,
Tales,
but
Tunes, or
even
Tomfoolery.
This is the 2017 joke.
Right.
yeah.
2018, I'm going to have a
Whole new
lights out.
Yeah,
Man.
one new joke.
New
for
material,
2018.
and no offense, but even if it sucks, it's still new material. Hey, what I was thinking, here's what I was wondering, Jerry, and there's...
what, Gene?
Well, to have a... no, I'm not going to make fun of this, because it's... Hugh Hefner died.
Right.
And
91.
it made us all wonder. I speak on behalf of America when I ask the question. Did you
never
ever
speak on behalf of America.
And God help America if you did, Gene Galvin.
I speak on behalf of Megan Hills and me.
Yeah.
Nope,
Go ahead.
not
No,
even that.
not even that. Not even
Okay,
that.
well, what about
I'm
this?
all alone when I
Yeah.
ask. Have you been to the Playboy Mansion?
Oh, have you?
If so, tell us about it.
Well, that blue pill.
Yeah.
Why can't we get off of that? No, actually, I was.
Really?
Yeah, about one time, and it was probably around 20 years ago, to be honest. They had a Valentine's Day party that they always
That's like
had.
a big one.
Oh, it's,
like
it's
that's
huge.
the
It
party.
wasn't like I'm a personal friend and he invited me to his
Yeah,
mansion.
yeah.
No, it was one of these huge things, and I was out in L.A. taping something. And so we got invitations to the Valentine's Day party at the Playboy Mansion. So you drive up there, and it's,
the Playboy Mansion.
it's and it's clearly over the top and all that. But honestly, my memory of it mostly was the place is filled with celebrities. I mean, not like me, but A-list
Like
celebrities.
real ones.
Yeah, real ones. And I'm going, and I know you're not going to believe it, but I was just impressed with all the famous people that were there.
Yeah.
And but the guy that was just most enjoyable was John Lovitz, you know, the
Oh, I love
comedian.
him.
And he was in League of Our Own.
Yeah, League of Our
You know, great movie. Anyway, and I just remember we were standing there talking for, honestly, a half hour, 45 minutes, and he is a riot in person.
Is he?
Yeah, the guy has that dry wit and all that.
Yeah.
And there were a whole bunch of celebrities there, and
Who else?
oh,
Other than you, I mean.
Was Hefner in the crowd?
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was there, and I had met him on some other occasions. Like, I mean, he was always very nice to me, and you know, he was an iconic figure,
Sure.
clearly controversial, and in certain ways very progressive with his magazine, but in other ways, obviously, you know, turning women into clearly objectifying women, and
Sure.
there's no way to deny it, even though every teenage kid in our generation had a Playboy magazine under their mattress. But it was,
Wait a minute.
Gene didn't.
Everybody had it.
yeah.
No, it's actually-
You had Men's Monthly.
Not that there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
that, Gene.
No,
Not-
Not that there's anything wrong with that, no. It was Penthouse.
But,
But not that there's anything wrong
Yeah.
with that.
Dear
Yeah.
Penthouse. Oh, jeez.
But you know,
that's really
on
bad.
some other issues other than that, you know, which you can't justify, even though we joke about it, you really can't justify that in today's world when we've all been, hopefully, we've all been educated and all that. But on some issues, he was really very progressive and
Yeah.
was a big supporter of those causes. So, like every human being, at the end of your life, it's a mixed bag, you know, and you hope you did more good things than bad things.
Sure.
Yeah, because
I'm
we,
about tied right now, so so
A
I
real even race there,
yeah,
Springer.
I need one more good thing before I go.
This podcast does not count.
Oh, my obituary is going to be horrible.
Good
I
thing.
can
like to
already
take
write
a-
the first paragraph.
Oh, shoot.
I'd like to take a whack at writing the obit and the tombstone.
Oh,
I think-
no.
Yeah.
Oh, here lies Jerry Springer.
No,
Yeah.
my tombstone I already know.
What's it
It's
gonna
good.
say?
I won't be right back.
I thought it was just going to say, my bad.
Yeah.
My bad.
So I had a brush with greatness once. I went to a Joan Baez concert.
Oh, okay.
And back in the day, and she performed at Music Hall in Cincinnati, a wonderful playhouse. And so, big concert, a lot of people there. And when it was over, my buddies and I somehow knew that you could go backstage, which we did. And Joan Baez was sitting at a desk, a beautiful desk, you know, not like a real institutional desk, but a table in a high back chair. It was all very cool. And she's sitting there, and she had a pen or something, and she's signing autographs. And you had your moment, one at a time. You could get up to Joan Baez. Joan Baez. And I was a big fan, and I loved the concert. And she was at the time, I'm guessing 20-something. And I was, I don't know, she might have been 30, and I might have been 20 in college, Xavier University. And I got my moment, and I made some jokes with her and got her laughing. And then I said, you want to go out?
You asked Joan Baez out.
That's it. That's
the
my
nerve
claim.
of you, sir.
I asked out Joan Baez.
Let me
And
guess
what,
the
I was
answer.
going to say, what does she say, Gene?
Well, I just showed you a picture of my wife, and it's not
Yeah.
Joan Baez.
Yeah.
Hey, my wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a picture on Facebook. Just
Yeah.
giving her. She looks.
I have
I'd
to
say
tell
she
you, like,
looks better than Joan Baez. And Joan
Gene here
Baez
is way
pretty
over kicking
cool.
his coverage with Bonnie. Like, this
Yeah.
woman is really nice.
You must have done
Way,
something.
way out of my league.
Way
You must have
out
done
of your
something really bad for you to suddenly bring that up on this
I know.
podcast.
By the way, my wife is gorgeous.
I mean, good Lord, how blatant.
Also, Mickey, Jerry sends his
yeah.
love.
No, it's just overwhelmed with love.
Yeah.
That's
I know,
why.
that is true. Bonnie's great. We had a
Anyway,
wonderful time
she's a
Saturday.
doll.
We
night,
did. We
actually.
went out, Jerry
Yeah.
and his wife and
We
my
broke
wife
the
and I.
well. Every year it's
Yeah.
a tradition. You know,
Yeah.
it was Yom Kippur, which is the Jewish Day of Atonement. It's like our confession. You know, Jews do it in one day, and you know what Catholics do whenever you go to confession.
Yeah.
But my one day is never
Weekly.
quite long enough.
The
Because
atonement, the Day of Atonement takes a little longer for
the
you, does it,
service
sir?
is over, people start leaving, and the rabbi always says, Springer, not so fast.
You, back here, sir. I'll see you back there.
But anyway, we break the fast because for 24 hours you don't eat. But every year, Gene and Bonnie go with us.
We
to
love
dinner
it.
afterwards. It's
we
great fun.
love it. We had a good
great.
time, and no, Joan Baez did not say yes.
Yeah,
Did she
that's
laugh
right.
at you?
Interfered with your
No,
story.
there's no punchline.
But that is
She
great
said
because
no.
I would be impressed that you had the nerve to ask her out. 'Cause
Yeah. Oh,
I love her.
I
I think she's
I
Joan
had
Baez.
no trouble
I-
asking the question, and I was going to try to joke my way into her heart. And
Oh, yeah.
I may
How'd that
have
work?
gotten
Yeah.
partially up an artery, but I
yeah.
didn't get all the way there.
Yeah.
No, she did not go.
Yeah.
I had her laughing. Well, I had her laughing.
Yeah.
She was laughing.
Well, I
But
believe
that
that.
didn't turn
I
into
do
a
believe
date.
I
that
think
she
you
was
had a better chance of paying her $3 million to go out with you than
That's probably
joking
so.
your way in.
Yeah, where were you when I needed you? You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Sorry, Jer.
Never happened. Let's get serious for a moment.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you know, I mean, how many of these are we going to have? We've talked about Sandy Hook where kids were murdered with weapons, and there have been a string of these in the latest Saturday
Columbine,
night. Columbine,
Sandy Hook, Orlando.
Yeah.
Bernardino.
Big guns too, not
big-
handguns in this case. Everybody knows the story. 19 guns were found in a suite, 2 broken out windows, 59 people killed, hundreds, and thousands and millions terrorized by it. I mean, millions of people. I count my daughter or my family terrorized by this, by the threat of this. So, Jerry, we need your wisdom. Will it change anything?
Well, you gave me a little bit of hope as we were driving over here, and we talked about what I would be talking about. We both operate, we all operate on the theory that in the end, liberals always win. And that isn't just braggadocio, it's just that if you look at our culture and our society over the last 100 years, in the end, even though there are individual elections we lose and individual issues which we lose, ultimately the liberal position becomes mainstream in the way America goes. Every generation is more liberal than the generation before it on any cultural issue you can think of. And so it is true liberals always win. And the most recent major victory is, for example, gay marriage, which 20 years ago was unthinkable. And so the question now is, does that, and you were saying because liberals always win, in the end, eventually enough people, because the polls show that most people want some kind of gun control, certainly some of these massive weapons, that you would think at some point the politicians will turn around and do something about it. And so that's my only hope, that might at some point happen. Though right now, I got to admit, I'm very cynical about all this. And what makes me cynical about it is I have seen this script. It's a replay. All you do is put in different numbers in a different city.
Yeah.
I remember back, for people not from this area, 30 years ago, I was a news anchor on the NBC affiliate here in Cincinnati. And we used to joke, and this is true, we used to joke, because we were local news, that we could write one script for our news and just come in an hour early before we broadcast and put in the relevant dates, the relevant names and numbers, because every broadcast was the same. Good evening. There's been an auto accident on, and we put in the name of the street, and and we'll have details later on in the newscast. Such and such was indicted today, whatever. So the news headlines every day on local news was always the same. As I said, only the names and the numbers changed. And so we kind of joked about that. Well, now, which obviously is not a joke, the script, I mean, you start watching cable news and you watch the newscasts, and we all were this past few days. Oh my gosh, how, if you have left the planet for a couple of months, you come back, this You didn't know where this was. It's the same thing. Bodies strewn over the place. They think they got the killer. How many were involved? Videos of people there. The interviews with people that were at the scene. And then the politicians, the White House speaks. And this time what I found so appalling about it is, or at least at first interesting, is the presidential statement. This Trump guy, he has, with every one of the disasters that has taken place with shootings over the last, 2 years, he always is quick. The very first thing he says or tweets has to do with, we need to ban these people. It's an obvious terrorist act. I should be congratulated. I was right, etc. And it was interesting. There was no such thing this time. And the only reason I can see for no mention of anything with this shooting was that the shooter happened to be a white American Christian. And Trump politically can't ban white American Christians. So for the first time, he didn't talk about what the problem is. In other words, his solution always was ban this group, ban the Muslims. But when it comes to dealing with what this issue was, which obviously is an issue about certain types of guns and what people can do to guns to make them assault weapons, he didn't want to talk about that because there is documentary evidence that he is in bed with the NRA. And he says, you had my back, I will always have your back. Those were his words, by the way. So he's not going to do anything. And truthfully, the Republican Congress and the Republican Senate is not going to do anything either. So that's the second thing that came out of the White House. The first thing I noticed was the silence on the substantive issue of what's at stake here with all these people dying and, over 500 already hurt. The second thing that got me was then when they said from the White House, we're not going to politicize this. This is no time, when people started talking about some kind of gun control and what are we going to do about these weapons. The White House says, this is no time to become political. Let's not throw politics. I think it was Sean Hannity said, it's shameful that the left is bringing up gun control at a time like this when families are grieving. Well, you know what? Nobody said that on 9/11 that we can't mention terrorism. As soon as 9/11 hit, as soon as the second plane hit, everybody was talking about terrorism. And the right wing wasn't saying it's too early to start talking about this stuff, who's to blame and all that. So they don't want to talk about gun control. And the reason they don't want to talk about any kind of gun control is because, as we all know, almost every Republican politician, and even some Democratic politicians, but mostly Republican politicians, the alt-right and the NRA run our government on this issue because they will primary out any Republican or any politician who's in favor of anything, even the most sensible ideas. So why wouldn't we talk about gun control? Every poll shows most Americans understand that certain kinds of weapons have no place in our society. The only reason, and I'm going to use a general term, even though those who really know guns know that it isn't but when I say assault weapons, you know what I'm talking about. You do something to a gun that permits it to fire off tons of rounds within a few seconds, So the only purpose of that weapon outside of the military is to kill as many people as possible in as short a time as possible. That is the only purpose of the weapon. The weapon has no use in sport. You wouldn't use that in hunting. You don't need that for target practice. It's not a weapon that you need to protect your home. You don't need to fire, 1,000 rounds or 500 rounds in 30 seconds to protect your home. It's not needed because the government is taking over. I mean, really, are there any people left in our country that believe that you have to have your own personal machine gun or assault weapon because the government's coming after you? First of all, what a stupid idea to begin with. But secondly, if you really think the government's coming after us with weapons, do you not think they would send a drone over to drop some kind of a... They'd vaporize us. The government's going to show up, uh-oh, let's not. This guy's got a machine gun. We better leave that house alone. I mean, just, there's no logical reason for having these weapons other than collectors or people that want to kill a lot of people. Now, you can say that the NRA will say, well, wait a second, we don't need to get into all this. The Second Amendment protects us. Well, time out. First of all, it's certainly debatable that the Second Amendment was dealing with the right to form a militia, which is the first clause of the Second Amendment, and so that's why you need the weapons. Well, these guys aren't joining a militia. But beyond that, the Supreme Court has already said some gun control is okay because obviously we do have gun control laws in some states. So obviously it's constitutional. But secondly, even if you're a purist and say the Second Amendment grants everybody the right to have a gun, every constitutional right is allowed to be temporized if there is, and the legal words are if there's a legitimate governmental function. So we have the right of free speech, but the government is allowed to restrict certain kinds of speech if there is a legitimate governmental purpose, such as pornography, yelling fire in the theater. So there are exceptions to every right that we have. It's the burden's on the government to prove that there's, as I said, a legitimate governmental purpose. Who doesn't believe that public safety is a legitimate public purpose? Of course it is. The government's there to provide protection. So there's no possible argument for not having enough control to say that these weapons of, in a sense, mass destruction should not be permitted to be purchased by individual citizens that aren't part of the military. And the only reason we don't get this legislation is because the Republican Party, which is in charge of the Congress and the Senate, they owe their political existence to the NRA, because if they go against them, they will be funded by someone who runs against them and they will lose. And they are in control. And I think we've reached the point now where somebody's got to be willing to stand up. The reason I'm pessimistic is there are structural parts of our government that won't permit us to change the Congress or the Senate, particularly on an issue such as this. We tend to think the Senate is more progressive than the House. We know the problem with the House is gerrymandering. Well, the Supreme Court is dealing with that issue right now. But even though most people vote Democrat, we have a Republican Congress because the way the districts are drawn. And we wound up where they take the Democratic votes and they pile them all into one district, so there are not enough Democratic votes in the other districts to make sure that they can win some of those. So we understand that. But the Senate, do not believe that the Senate is necessarily a progressive entity, particularly on issues like guns. Why? Well, our founders, when they created the Senate, which was the deal so that we could get the Constitution passed, the idea was the House would be based on population, but the Senate, each state, even the small states, would get 2 senators. So a state like Wyoming, which has about as many people as Ludlow, Kentucky, they get as many senators as California or New York. So basically, the Senate is made up, and most of the states, the middle of the country, most of the states are primarily rural. Most of the land mass in America is rural. The big cities are all on the coast, except in Chicago and, Cleveland, whatever, but, you know, the population is amassed on the coasts. But they only get their 2 senators. You put all the middle states together, even though they're only 20, 30% of the country in terms of population, they have a majority of the Senate. And these rural areas do want to hold on to their guns. Because there is some, not assault weapons, but there is a necessity. The people that live there want to hold on to their guns for safety. They live out in rural areas, etc. I get it. But if you know this structural difference, how are we ever, I don't care what the polls show about more people want more gun control, as long as most of the senators live in rural states and represent rural states, it's going to be very difficult to pass the legislation that most Americans, any reasonable person would say you don't have to have assault weapons. And so we're going to continue to have these headlines. You got 59 dead so far. You've got over 500 wounded. We don't know how many more of them are going to die, even as we're talking. By the time people hear this podcast, those that aren't listening live, that number will likely rise. And you know what? Those politicians are going to say, every one of them, and it's sickening, they're all going to say, our thoughts and our prayers go out to these people. They all say that. You know, that's like saying to someone, have a nice day, after they hand you a cup of coffee. You know, it's just something you say. You walk by, hey, how you doing? It's a meaningless, it's a nice thing to say, but it's meaningless in solving the problem. Thoughts and prayers? We elected you not to be our ministers, not to be our rabbis with your prayers. We elected you to do something with legislation in our government. And you're doing nothing. They are doing nothing. These people ought to be thrown out of office. And, you know, if they want to have a new saying, instead of saying, our thoughts and prayers are with you, which they say by rote every single time, they should remember Dylan's line, how many deaths will it take till we know that too many people have died?
You know, and Jerry, I totally agree. Great job, by the way.
Yeah, Jerry.
There's a couple things that could happen, and I'm not sure I'm exactly hopeful, but as the poll data shows, and we were talking driving down here about the Quinnipiac poll that's recent, that showed in the 50s, mid-50s, high 50s, people say we need more restrictions. Guns don't make us safer. We know that about a third of America has guns. And as gun sales go up, which all the conservatives tout, all that's happening, and research verifies this, is it's just the same people that have guns are buying more guns.
Right.
It isn't like everybody, the other 2/3 are running out to buy guns. I have guns in my home.
Yep.
So I'm not talking about this as some, you know, I'm whatever you want to call it, snowflake, dipshit. I've got guns.
Well,
But
the second part, I think
well,
we can
yeah,
still go with.
verified by other things. I get that.
Right,
I get that. I'm not going to resist that. But look, here's the low-hanging fruit. And as these polls tick up, and sadly as more and more people get killed, the polls will tick up and up and up. That guy in Las Vegas was in a sweep, 19 guns found there, more guns found at his homes. The early information is 2 guns had what are called bump stocks. And bump stock is a conversion kit that makes a gun that's a semi-automatic, meaning every shot is your finger pull. And a bump stock reconfigures the weapon, so if you lean right, you pull that trigger back, the recoil just keeps fire, fire, fire. And that's we probably didn't hear the early information is we weren't hearing automatic weapons, and we all heard it, and it's a sound I don't want to hear again.
Right.
It's a freaking machine gun.
Yeah.
Of course.
So that could be just an AK-15, AK-47 with bump stocks set up on 2 tripods, or maybe at high-powered rifles on those, and he was shooting the other ones, you know, alternately. But listen, if he didn't have that technology, this is low-hanging fruit. 59 people would not be dead.
Yep.
Garen effing T'd 59 people would not be dead.
Because you
Would some
couldn't kill
people
those
be dead?
people
Couldn't
with
do
one
it.
shot at a time.
Because everybody's running. Look at the video. He was able to get people before they could run out of there because he had a machine gun.
Yep.
Now, here's the low-hanging fruit. They tried recently in Congress to get bump stocks abolished. People pulled back. The chicken shit Republicans would not do it.
But why?
Bump stocks
But
because
why?
because they haven't yet figured out. This is how the Vietnam War ended. I just watched PBS's documentary series. Public opinion is the most powerful thing in this country, and it grows. That's why we have gay marriage. That's why black people and white people get married today. Everything that Jerry Springer says, liberals always win, he's right about that. It's all driven by public opinion. Finally, one day, conservatives say, I guess the time passes by. That will happen, I hope, with guns. Low-hanging fruit. Bump stocks. That should have been decided yesterday with a plan and an announcement that's going to be discussed next week on the floor of Congress.
Yep.
Secondly, silencers. Third, the fact that mentally deranged people verified by doctors should be stopped from being able to go in and buy a gun. Does not exist now. People on the terrorist watch list does not exist. They can go in and buy guns. Assault weapon, magazine size. It's been debated. That guy, think about what we just saw happen. A guy is up there with a bump stock on a couple guns, and he's got big magazines, and I freaking listen to it. There's a pause while he reloads, puts in another magazine. Everything that we can do to slow down the firing saves a goddamn life.
Yep,
Everything.
There you go.
That's the low-hanging fruit.
But they got to be willing to do it, because the NRA's position has always been, once you open the door a little bit to make this this change, then you're kind of admitting that Congress has the right to make more changes. And that's why even the most sensible things. For example, thank God they didn't have silencers.
Right. My God, what
Because-
people have done.
Now,
Because
the
you
good
wouldn't
point.
know where the bullets are
They
coming
would've-
from. And there's
yeah.
legislation right now, which the Republicans are considering passing. So it's not just that they're not passing legislation to make us safer. They're now affirmatively doing worse things. Because, you know, whoever can look best to the NRA will get more money for the next campaign. And the NRA is very smart, because they realize the public is mostly against them. So when they decide to go after a candidate for office who they want to beat because they don't like his or her position on guns, they don't, in these certain districts, they don't go after the person because of the gun position. They fund the campaign on some other position just to get that person elected. In other words, they don't run their campaigns on guns. They find out where you are as a candidate. I remember when I used to be running, you get a questionnaire. Of course, I always failed. And but, you know, if you're bad on the issue, they will find an opponent, fund that opponent. They may never mention the word guns because they know the public will turn against them. They see the same polls we do. They beat you on another issue. They'll find a scandal. They'll find that you're not good on the budget. They'll say this guy's going to raise taxes, this guy, whatever. They find another issue to beat you on. But the real reason they're going after you is because they don't like your position on guns. That is the power of the NRA.
And let me quote, just to put a capper on this, quote Dylan again. The times they are changing. And that's why gay marriage is going on today. The times change. That's your point. Liberals always win. And isn't it sad we have to have another mass murder for the ball to move a little farther down toward the red zone? That's horrible.
If
How
it-
many,
I
I mean,
know.
it quotes Dylan again, how many deaths will it take till they know? It's how many of these things have to happen before finally the people laugh at
There'll
the
be
NRA.
another issue. I mean, I'm really being a pessimist now. But there's just, see, the gay rights thing, we always knew that people had a position on gay marriage, but it really didn't affect their life if they weren't gay.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like you could, at a cocktail party, say, oh, I don't think gay people should get married. But it wasn't like when you went to sleep at night, you were worried that the gays down the block would get married. It didn't affect you. So it wasn't that powerful of an opposition, even though if you took a poll, people would have said no on gay marriage. But when it comes to guns, you're talking about people who do not want to give it up. And that becomes their single issue to vote on.
Jerry, it's
that's
a
the trouble with
third.
progressives.
It's a third of the country. We can, 2/3 can beat the third. I agree with what you're saying. And by the way, no one is saying, including me, and I'm passionate about this, that we're going to go in and confiscate guns.
No.
Ain't going to happen. Nobody's going to ban guns. Will not happen. I'm not proposing it. But if a third of America has guns, as I said before, me included, 2/3 beats 1/3 every time. So I'm with you that gay marriage is, people who are homosexual are much smaller percentage than a third of America, I guess. I don't even know. I don't even care. But 2/3 will beat the third. And we got to stay on this.
Yeah, well, what we found out, and it's the same issue we deal with abortion, for example, is that the people on some of these cultural issues on the right, whether it's abortion or gun rights, they become a single issue voter. With those of us who are progressive, we're for gun control, but we're also for pro-choice. And we're also for health insurance for all Americans. So, in other words, we get split up on how we're going to vote. We may wind up voting for a person who likes guns because that person is so great on health insurance and money for the schools and whatever. That's the problem. Some of these right-wingers are so focused on their single issue that 1/3 really becomes more powerful.
No,
because
our
our 2/3 gets
it's
split
1/3.
up.
That group you're talking about, people who are against a woman's right to choose and who are against any kind of gun control, who are against homosexuals, this has gotten clear for me under Donald Trump. A third of America is like that. And I say the 2/3 beats that third every time. They're all the same people.
But the
They're
2/3
not
have to
split
do
up.
something, and that's the thing. Like the 2/3 have to speak up and they have to do something. That's what we've been seeing again and again and again.
Well, we gotta
People
get
get
busy.
complacent, and
Yeah,
they,
well,
you know.
yeah. Oh, that's
and is it going to
definitely
take
true.
things like this again and again and again to happen to get that 2/3
Well,
up and doing something?
yeah, take West Virginia, and probably even Kentucky. Now that I think about it,
Yeah.
you know, let's say West Virginia is probably on quote our side on health insurance.
Now you're making a good point there.
Yeah,
so that
they really
that
are.
Voter
But-
could be for a labor type person, but
Right,
also.
but
a
when it comes to
pro-gun
guns, and
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's so.
Good point. Well, it's
But we'll see.
complicated, but we got to keep fighting it.
This is too serious.
All right, yes. Yes, it is. But so.
Where is the fellow with the hearing
I
aid?
hate you. There is no fellow with a hearing aid. It's a bad joke.
Even
Don't
I
do it.
don't see that guy this week.
Don't even do it, Jerry. Don't do it. So this evening we have with us again Brent James and the Vintage Youth. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah.
It's good to see you. So what has been going on since last we met?
Shows and sleepless nights and
Yeah.
more shows and finishing this record.
Yeah, and so you've got a couple some notable people on this new record.
Yes, yeah, we have, if anybody remembers the band Blind Melon.
Loved
Had a
Blind
big
Melon.
jam.
Yeah.
We got Roger Stevens from Blind Melon on tune playing guitar. So
Cool.
Good for
Ricky
you.
and a band called OAR. They're
Yeah.
good buddies of ours. And got
Crazy Game of
Richard
Poker,
on-
man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we got Richard on the songs too, so it should be out hopefully within the next month or so.
Cool,
It's
cool.
being
If you-
mastered right now. So.
If you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves again, I know you've been here, but let's hear your names again. And
I'm Brent James.
Brent James.
Ricky Vanneman,
Hi, Rick.
Nick Baverman.
Baberman. Well, welcome back, gentlemen. And the first song you're with us tonight is going to be Just Fine. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, let's hear it. We need some Just Fine music after our conversation.
That's my work.
There we go.
There I was, yes, she looked me in the eye. Said, what you gonna do with your life? Why don't you even try? just fine. So I followed my heart out to the East Coast. I met a girl who's an artist. Yeah, she doesn't even know. She says most people are either sun or they're the rain. She likes to listen to Christmas music and laugh at her pain. And we were 20 years old, dancing on top of the world. Yeah, we'll be just fine. Yeah, I will be just fine if I let it out the line. Yeah, I will be just fine. There's a route to forgiveness, but I'm still looking for a way. Looking for the way. Yeah, we'll be just fine. Yeah, I will be just fine if I let it out the line. Yeah, I will be just fine. You know I will. Yeah, I will be just fine. Yeah, I will be just fine. Come on, if I let it out the line. Yeah, I will be just fine. Yeah, I will be just fine.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Bravo!
So we mentioned Hugh Hefner passing, but I'm seeing your shirt. We lost Tom Petty last evening.
Yeah.
So Brent's
Man, I don't think we can be more heartbroken.
it's
He's
awful.
seriously, him, Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
and Bob
Yeah.
Seger are like the reason why I picked up a guitar.
Yeah, I
So,
saw your T-shirt. Just kind of, yeah, no, it's awful. But
yeah.
man, oh man, good music living on, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, so people can check out your wonderful music at BrentJamesMusic.com.
Yeah.
And you have a new album coming out called Waiting So Long, is that
Yes,
correct?
Waiting So Long. Yes, 7 songs on it. Hopefully we'll be out in the next 30 days if we have our way about it. So
Very cool.
Everybody's very
Good.
slow when you get a record mastered and mixed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully in the next 30 days.
Well, cool.
Super.
Well, you got another song for us this evening that we cannot
Yeah.
wait to listen to, Roller Coaster.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
let's hear it,
This
man.
will be on there as well.
Here I stand with this old street light. It's the day after Christmas, and I've gotta catch this flight. You stood in the window, wave goodbye. My rear view mirror caught the tears in your eyes.
thank you, Brent.
Yeah.
You know, it just brings it all. You know, coming here every Tuesday night, we're talking about this awful stuff that's going on, and we have debate and all this. But to hear your music and to share that with us, that's what this is all about. Thank you so much, man. That was
Beautiful. I have one question. I mean,
Oh,
when you were
yeah.
doing all that, do you read music? No. So, no, I.
It's not on the mic. I don't know. Here we go. Here we go.
Oh.
Here we go. Got a mic coming to you.
Oh, well, we had one.
Oh,
Some technical difficulties
Yeah.
here.
Here we go. Right there's a mic.
speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I had to learn that too. Yeah.
We'll get
So,
you there.
so you don't read music. So when you initially wrote the melody, okay. So then he's playing the melody, and then you're figuring that out just as he's doing it, or how does it happen to someone like me that doesn't know how this?
It's hard to explain. I just feel it. Like, it's just a feeling. I hear it in my head immediately. Like, especially with these guys, you know. It
It's
just
pretty
happens.
instant, oddly enough. It's
Yeah.
kind of
How
you
did
sit
it
down
start?
and like, you know, like I'll write it and then come in, play it, and they just grab it. And I think that that's like music is, you know, it's so it really is like the closest thing, like Tom Petty said, to real life magic. I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't, either you do have the magic with people or you don't. And
I don't think any of us read music really do.
no, I don't know.
Well, that I mean that's yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it always just
Oh, that's
seems to just.
honestly, you guys are
Beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
what
we know
a
any good
thrill.
managers, we need one. You want to
Gene?
manage us, Jerry?
You don't
Well,
want Jerry to manage you.
we
We
are.
need one, seriously. We're working with William Morris a little bit on the booking
That-
side,
that-
but we
that's-
need a good.
They're my. Yeah, I was on
Oh,
the phone.
really?
Yeah, they're my agent.
Oh, no
yeah.
way.
Well, we're talking 10%, but anyway.
I'll give you 15.
Oh, yeah.
You heard it right here.
Well, see you guys.
All right, this was fun, Jerry.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Again, check them out at BrentJamesMusic.com. Thank you guys so much, and if you don't mind,
great.
Jerry's going to hop in here
Oh,
with
this is
you.
a career.
Sorry.
Let's do it.
No, this
Down
is a
by the
Yeah,
riverside.
this is a career ender for you.
Yeah, the band formerly known as Brent James. Yeah,
This
sorry,
was their
guys.
last song.
It was a good run.
Yeah.
Ready, baby?
Gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside. I'm gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. All right, Jerry.
Get it, Jerry.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study Y'all come back now, you hear?